I have not heard before. That was really nice. So I thought people would like to talk about, you know, how they knew Khorshed, and just to get a sense of where the group is at in terms of knowing Khorshed, and that'll help me direct some of the comments that I have. So does anybody want to talk about? We have such a big group here. It's really great. Thank you guys for coming. That's really amazing. Yes, David.
Gonda and I sort of we've been in the 90s, I guess, when we go to Marasat on Marasat days, and then one time when we came back through the trust office, we dropped in to see Khorshed, and we finished up sort of dropping in maybe 3 or 4 times, I guess, and once or twice we didn't drop in, so she would say, "Where's David and Glenda?" But it was really nice, and she told those wonderful stories about you know, the divas and which I have reread since then, but I was very pleased the book came out because, you know, I'd forgotten a lot of the details, and we've forgotten a lot of the details, so we've sort of last few months we sort of just read the book, you know, 40 minutes and 3 or 4 afternoons a week to each other, sort of gone through it, and we've really enjoyed it.
I'm glad you hear that.
Yeah. And her obedience and her mother's obedience is just amazing.
It's astounding.
Well, I felt while I was reading it, David, you don't know that, but I felt like I was in India when I was reading it, so.
My main knowledge is the wonderful words of Rustam Falati in those 6 volumes. I don't know which volume, but he often in those stories talks of the time he valued so much and regularly calling in, spending time with Khorshed. I think when he was staying in the compound, it was a daily event.
They were great friends, no doubt about it. Yeah. So it sounds like, does anybody else want to say? Yes,
I just wanted to say she used to teach us all the Bujave arty in the early days when she still lived at Marasat, you know, and we'd go out there and she'd make sure we knew how to sing it.
And she also liked to teach the kids in the trust compound Baba songs, and there were a lot of them for a number of years, and they would come to see her in the mornings, and she would teach them how to sing Baba songs. It was quite joyous when they would come. It was really special.
What year did she move into the trust compound?
It was about 81, right around then. She had been living in Bombay for many years. I think perhaps some of you, a number of people had visited her in Bombay, and in the flat that she had. And I don't know if you knew this, but that very flat that Khorshed was living in her later years in Bombay, was the very same flat Baba had lived in after he closed Munsley Mead in the 20s. Yeah, really amazing. And she got that flat from her aunt, which is even more amazing because the whole family was against Baba, and they had gifted it to her, and it was the very same flat Baba had been in. So that was very touching to her. So it sounds like a number of you have met her, and do people have any questions that they'd like to ask that maybe I can answer, and or maybe add some stories to? Yes, Diane.
I'd like it if you could start with just a little bio, a bit about her, and particularly early days.
You know, that's a great thing. So Khorshed, I would like people to. One of the things that's important to me is to share. The question is how can when we started putting this book together, the question was how can the world get to know who Khorshed was, and we made some decisions about what we would do in putting together this book, and so in the language that was used, in the stories that were included, a number of things were decided to. We wrote it for the people who'd come later, and the thing that's been very gratifying is that the people who knew her also have liked the book, and that's been particularly special. But in terms of who Khorshed was, Khorshed met Baba when she was 12. She and in the early days of Manzli Meme, and this was in 1922 when she met Baba, and I'll tell a story about that, about how she met Baba. But so she was in the ashram early. In fact, when Baba during the Manzli Meme days, Khorshed was asked to go to Manzli Meme every day after school, and her dad was asked to come for arti in the mornings and in the evenings, before and after work, and her mom was there, invited to come to Manzli Meme anytime. And Baba would also often stop off at their home in Bombay, which is about a 10-minute walk in the Dadar area, very close to Manzli Meme. Baba would often come during the day, and so there was a very close relationship. And in fact, many of the early men Mandali were actually relatives of Khorshed. Adi Sr. was Khorshed's cousin. Adi's brother, of course, also. Sarosh was Khorshed's cousin. And Gulmai was her aunt. Not that Gulmai was in Manzli Meme, but so there's just many, many family ties. Khorshed herself was related to Baba on both sides of her family, through her mother and her father's line at the great-grandparent level. And so it was she was related to Baba. She was related to Mera through marriage, Mera's family through marriage, of Rustam and Frani. And she was Mera's best friend, especially in the early days. And in fact, Baba said to her that in this life, Mera fulfilled the role of Radha, and Khorshed fulfilled the role of Chandrika, Mera's best friend. And they were very close. I'm guessing everybody knew Bauji, right? So I want to tell you a little bit about the soul that this book is written about. So Rustam Falahati was living in the trust compound and working on the chemical factory and getting that all dealt with. And he would often he'd often see Khorshed, but he'd often have talks with Bauji, and Rustam would often ask questions. But one particular day he goes to Bauji and he says, "Hey Bauji, each of the Mandali has a special characteristic and that characteristic, or that aspect of them, they are matchless. That particular aspect, they're matchless. Nobody can equal them. Who among the Mandali, Bauji, who among the Mandali could take suffering without complaint, could take whatever Baba dished out to them? Who, in your opinion?" And so many of you know Bauji, and this man had his share of suffering and more, right? Bauji, without batting an eye, said Khorshed. Khorshed was the one who could take the suffering. Rustam asked him another time, and the same question, only in different words. And Bauji said, Khorshed. Khorshed alone could do it. When you read the book and you think about how close she had been to Baba and Mera, and then to see that in the later years of her life, she was unable to, at Baba, Baba ordered her to be in Bombay, to stay in Bombay, and that separation from her one beloved, whom she had given everything up for, and her best friend, who she loved dearly, that separation was incredibly hard. You'll read that. So this is the soul we're talking about. This is the person who no sacrifice was too great. She gave her family was wealthy. She could have had anything, a life of pleasures and comforts, but she gave it all away without a second thought to be with her beloved. That's who we're talking about. This is the person. worked for you on an introduction? Yeah.
Thank you.
So-
One thing I remembered, that there was someone there who was a particularly good singer, and she said his voice is very much like Barbara's. And she was around when Barbara was speaking, of course, and she remembered Barbara's voice when he used to sing, and she said, "Oh, his voice is very like Barbara's." You know. But I forget who it was. You know, it might have been Ward. Oh, sorry, it's a joke.
I don't know.
No, I can't remember either.
Yeah, but you're right. Khorshed was probably the last living Mandali to hear, to be alive. The last living Mandali to have heard Baba's sing. That's right. So those early days. So let me say a little bit more about Khorshed. So in the early days, she was, like I said, Baba had asked her to come to Manzali Mim every day after school, and Khorshed was as a kid a very strong-willed and strong person, and Khorshed was the kind of person who, she knew what she liked and she knew what she didn't like, and what she liked were boiled eggs, and what she didn't like was everything else. And so as it happened, she lived in an extended family. The family started out being quite poor, and her father, who was a spiritual seeker, he had one aim, which was to follow, to be able to practice his spirituality and to follow the masters. But because the family was so poor, because his father had died so early, her dad, whose name was Kaikushu, he had to support his mother and his sister and his two brothers, and so he had quite a burden. And then he got married, and so he had even another dependent. And they had a bottle shop. I guess that's the term here for a liquor store, right? And so they had a bottle shop in Bombay.
He sold milk.
That's right. He sold milk, and of the whiskey kind, and but he didn't like it at all. So it was very hard on him. He was very sad, and so he wanted to earn money so he could get rid of the obligations, so he could fulfill the obligations that he had to his family, but then he could go and devote his time to the spiritual masters. And so he had an investment strategy, and what was that? He bet on horses. So he bet on horses, but the horses, it was the lottery, they called it, and but he never won. So one day there was a Muslim friend who he met, who he knew, and this guy was a close friend, and the guy would ask him, "Kaikushu, you look so sad. You look so sad. Why are you looking so sad?" And usually Kaikushu would keep his problems to himself. He was a strong-minded person. He'd keep his problems to himself. But one day he broke down and he just told his friend, I'm just having a lot of trouble doing this work, and I want to spend my life devoted to spirituality, so I need money to take care of my family obligations." And the friend said, "Oh, well, I can help you." And Kaikushu was very excited. "How can you help me?" And the friend said, "Well, there's a way that you can get everything you want. Money, spirituality, anything you want." What is it? Well, it's a very difficult way. You have to draw a circle and be in the circle for 40 days and 40 nights without sleeping, without eating. You can only drink milk. You have to say certain prayers. But I can tell you all this. You'll have nightmares. Wild animals will come, snakes, wild apparitions will come after you. But if you are strong, you'll be able to do it, and you'll get everything you want. Kaikushu said, "I'll do it." So he went home, he told his wife Suna about it, and he drew a circle, and he got inside that circle, and that's what he did. For 38 days, he was there without sleeping, without eating, and as Khorshed used to say, on the 39th day, he took a little nap. So, and when he had this nap, he had a vision. And the vision was Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of wealth, was coming to him, and in her hands she had a baby. So she's coming to him with this baby. And Kaikushu is looking at her, and she offers him the baby, and he's like, "What? I don't want a baby." And so the goddess says, "No, take this." "No, I don't. I want spirituality." He says, "No, I want spirituality. I want money." She says, "No, take this baby. Everything that you want, you will get through this baby." So Kaikushu is like, he doesn't know what to say. He wants to accept what the goddess is offering, and yet he does not want another mouth to feed. But he thinks, well, the goddess is offering this to me, so maybe I should take it. So as he stretches out his hand to take the child, his arms turn silver. And she puts the baby in his hands, and he looks at the baby, and he is amazed at her beauty and her activeness and her liveliness and energy. And the goddess says, "Now take care of her. Give her everything she wants. Don't hit her, don't treat her badly. Be good to her, and everything you want will come to you." And then she disappears, and the vision goes. Oh, and he says, "Well, what's the name?" And the goddess says, "Her name should be Khorshed Banu." And then the vision disappears. So he wakes up, and he is upset. He was so close, and then he had this dream of having a baby. He was feeling in a bit of a bad mood, so he left. He figured he couldn't do anything more in the circle, so he got out of the circle, he walked out of the house, and he starts walking down the road. And as he's walking down the road, there's another man coming toward him. And as he passes the man on the road, the man says to him, "Would you like to be my partner?" And Kaikushu says, "What?" And the guy says, "Well, I have a jewelry shop in the Fort District of Bombay." Now, for those of you who don't know, the Fort District is the exclusive high-end business district in central Bombay. It still is. And so he said, "I have a jewelry shop in the Fort District in Bombay. I have 11 boys managing the counters, but I need a partner to help me run it. Would you like to be my partner?" And Kaikushu says, "Yes." And so the fortunes of the family, they had been poor up to that point, the fortunes of the family changed practically overnight, because the jewelry shop they sold a lot of jewelry, and the family became quite wealthy. And in fact, it turned out that Kaikushu had a flair for designing jewelry. He had very unique designs, and people really loved them. So, after a very short time, it came to be where the family's financial needs were met, and Kaikushu could take time off to go and visit the masters. So they got a home in the Dadar area, and because Kaikushu was supporting the whole family, they had the extended family living with them in multiple buildings in a compound. So Kaikushu would go off and visit the masters. He visited all of the perfect masters, and when he met he met all of them. And when he went to Sai Baba, and then Sai Baba sent him to Upasni. And once Kaikushu started seeing Upasni, he stuck with Upasni, and therein lies the connection of starting with Baba. But we were talking about Khorshed and her being strong-willed. So Khorshed very finicky eater. We talked about that. And
how long after the vision was
great, thank you. So let's go to that one. Let's branch there. So a couple years pass, and the family had a boy named Erich, but he died after a year due to some childhood illness. And then they had Khorshed. They had the girl. Now Kaikushu had forgotten this vision that he had at this point, and so they had the daughter, and they took her to the Zoroastrian priest, and who did the horoscope for her, and they asked the priest, what should the baby be called? And the priest looked up at the horoscope and said, Khorshed Banu. And Kaikushu was, this is the baby that the goddess had promised me. And so he knew that this was the one that they'd been waiting for. And so she became this much beloved daughter of Kaikushu and Suna, and with all the aunties and uncles around, they had their extended family in Bombay.
She was an only child?
They had another daughter as well, but she also died of a childhood illness. So yes, she was the only child, living child. Yeah.
Doubly special, I'd say, in the family.
That's right. Very special. And Khorshed, as she grew up, she was very, very talented musician, singer. So she played the harmonium, a singer, and she was excellent in her studies. And in fact, because the family was wealthy, they could afford the best tutors, the best music teachers in Bombay. And Khorshed, because she was so talented, gifted naturally, she was excellent. And so after she met Baba, and she started going to see him after school each day, her interest in school started to go away, because her longing to be with Baba was tremendous. In fact, it was so tremendous that she would feel ill if she had to go to school and not be with Baba, so she'd stay home and see Baba when he came over to their house. Or she would go to school, and on the way she would go to Manzali Mim and tell Baba that she felt ill, and Baba would give her weak tea and nurse her back. In fact, there's one story where Khorshed was over at the and she loved her music. I want you to know, she loved her music, she loved school, but she loved Baba more. And there's one incident where she was at Manzali Mim, and she was with Baba, and the servant came over from her house and knocked on the door, and Baba had the Manzali answer the door, and the servant came in and said, Khorshed, you need to come home. And Khorshed knew that he was coming to take her back home for a music lesson with the tutor, this very expensive tutor that she had. And she sent him away. She wanted to send him away. And Baba said, no. What do you want? Khorshed has a music lesson. No, I don't want to go, Baba. It's fine. I want to be here with you. And Baba said, no, you need to go. You need to go back to have the music lesson. And Khorshed begrudgingly went back. And after that, she canceled all her music lessons so that she would never have to be interrupted by music lessons again. And I want to tell you that her stomach would be really churning by the separation from Baba. She didn't want to be separated from Baba at all. And in fact, during that time, she wrote a poem. And I'll read it to you. It's called Pal Ma'awe, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it because that's Gujarati. The translation is, comes every moment. And by the way, Jahangir in Sydney translated this for us. comes every moment. Meher Baba's remembrance comes upon me every moment. Meher Baba's remembrance comes upon me every moment. Comes upon me every second, every moment. Comes upon me every moment. Meher Baba's remembrance. Enthusiasm leaps in my heart on taking his name. Enthusiasm leaps in my heart on taking his name. I am offering my mind, body, and wealth at your feet. Meher Baba's remembrance comes upon me every moment. This religious school of thought of Yezdan, of God, is great. Take his name continually and with attention. That was when she was 12. And after she and Mara became friends, she read that to Mara, and Mara liked it very much. So she did not want to be separated from him, and in fact, after a year of knowing Baba, she left school completely. So she didn't go back. That was her last school year. But that's the kind of person she was. And so there's funny stories about her not eating anything but an egg and being completely adamant that, no, I'm not going to eat anything. And the aunties would say, you must eat, you must. And she'd say, no. And they'd say, well, if you don't eat anything other than your egg, we're not going to give you your egg. Fine. Yeah? Well, if you're not going to eat your egg, if you're not going to eat anything, you're going to not have your egg, and you're going to have to go to bed. Fine. And she would storm off. So, that little story, as funny as it is, was actually a setup, because Khorshed, so you got the picture about only eating an egg. So the first day that Khorshed goes over to Manzli Meen, Baba asks her to go into the room, the Manzli Meen has a lot of Mandli, right? And as I mentioned to you, she was related to a lot of these men Mandli. But Baba would not let her talk to any of them. She couldn't talk to any of the men, except for Gustaji. She could only talk to Baba and Gustaji. And so Baba had her sit in the room, because Gustaji had a little room off the main room where Baba had people come in and meet him. And so she was there with Gustaji, and apparently at 6 o'clock there was a bell that rang. And this is her first day over there, so she doesn't know what's going on. And Gustaji says to Khorshed, oh, Khorshed, it's dinner time. Here, have a plate, and you can go have dinner. And Khorshed's like, well, I only eat, this is the thought bubble, but I only eat an egg. I don't think they're going to understand this. So she said, oh no, I'm not hungry, I've eaten already. It's okay. And Gustaji says, okay, fine. And so there's silence, and there was a lot of noise out on the veranda outside before the bell rang, but now it's silent. And after a few minutes, Khorshed gets a little curious. Now this is also very much Khorshed's nature. She's very curious and inquisitive. So she needs to know what's going on the veranda. So she has a peek outside and looks, and what does she see? She sees the Mandli all standing in a line with their plates, and Baba is serving the food to them with his own hands. And Khorshed said, what? The Mandli are receiving food from Baba's own hand and not me? She goes to Gustaji, give me that plate. And she walks out onto the veranda and gets in line. And she walks up, and there's Baba handing out, doing ladles of food, and she gets to the front of the line, and Baba takes an especially big ladleful and plops it on her plate. And what is it? It's cauliflower. Khorshed used to say, now there were a lot of things that I didn't like, but cauliflower I especially didn't like. And just as Baba lays the whole thing on her plate, he says to her, now you have to eat all of it. And she's looking at it like, oh my God. And she walks away. But she says to herself, Baba has given this to me so I have to eat it, have to. And so she eats the whole thing. Slowly and painfully at first, but she eats the whole thing. And what does she find at the end? She finds that she actually really likes cauliflower. And every day they would have a different vegetable. And every day Khorshed would have it. And so she would start liking all of these different things. And even the aunties and uncles who were absolutely against Baba had to admit, this is a minor miracle. That Meher Baba guy, he's something. If he could get Khorshed to eat.
Eat vegetables.
Yeah, eat vegetables. Yeah.
So Khorshed was the first woman, girl of the women Mandali.
Yes. Yes, she was.
I mean, where's
Mara hadn't come yet.
Gulmai was
Cool. Okay, so how it worked out was, that's a great question, Susie, thank you. How it worked out was, I mentioned that Kaikushu had been visiting the different perfect masters, and he visited, and after he started coming to Upasni, he stayed with Upasni. And so and he would bring his family members, right? So he brought Gulmai and her family to go to see Upasni.
his sister.
Well, that was Suna's sister.
Suna's sister.
Suna's sister, and their family came to Baba through them. Sarosha's family came to Baba through them coming to Upasni at Kaikushu's behest. And in 1917, Baba showed up in Sakori because he was starting to come down, right? That was 5 years from 1917 to 1922. He was coming down from that infinite state after Babajan had kissed him. And so Kaikushu met him there. And Kaikushu would come back home when on his trip, after he'd been on his trips to Sakori, and he'd talk about this beautiful Persian boy who had come to be Upasni's disciple. And Kaikushu would talk about what a humble, devoted aspirant Merwan was, how incredible he was, just his presence and being, and how Upasni and him being together was amazing. And Khorshed, every time she heard about Baba, when her father would mention it, she was very interested to hear everything about him. She didn't know why, but she was especially curious when she heard her father talk about Baba. So she was very interested in meeting him. And so this went on for a number of years, but this is how it happened, all of those people. And came to Upasni and met Merwan. And in 1922, what happened was Gulmai wrote a letter to Suna, her sister, and said, Merwan wants to celebrate Upasni Maharaja's birthday in a grand style, and you are invited to come. We need, Merwan would like to have all of the supplies for the party to be brought, because there was nothing available in Sakori. It was very, very little available. So firecrackers, gas lanterns, all of the prasad, all of the decorations. And Kaikushu, Khorshed's father, was happy to buy all of it. And they packaged it all up, and they went to Ahmednagar to be at Kushru quarters, and they put it on the train station on May 9th, and they waited for Baba to come on the train from Pune with all the Mandalay to go to Sakori. They met on the train. So Khorshed, of course, she's jumping out of her skin. She can't wait to be on this train to meet Merwan. She's heard so much about him. Her curiosity has been piqued over the years. She's really excited to meet Merwan. And so she cannot wait for the train to arrive. It couldn't arrive soon enough. Anyway, the train finally arrives. And as the train pulls up, the door opens, and Khorshed is on the train like a bullet. And there's a woman sitting in the doorway of the train compartment that she goes to, and Khorshed goes, "Where's Merwan?" And the woman just casually points there. Now that woman that Khorshed quickly stepped around and rudely asked the question of, that turned out to be Baba's mother. And Khorshed's like, but she's focused. She goes through the cars, and Baba had rented a bogie for all the mandali, and she goes to weaves through all the people, and then at last she sees him. And she says, "I felt such a deep satisfaction in my heart. I saw him. He was so beautiful. His eyes were brown and large and beautiful. His skin was like rose petals. His nose was noble. His mustache was fine." And she described his physical beauty. She said, "I was drowned in his eyes, and I fell in love with Merwan at that moment. I felt such a deep satisfaction in my heart, like something I had lost and had finally found. All these moments of my life up until this point had been wasted before seeing him." And she was deeply moved and forever devoted to him after that moment.
How old was she then?
12. And she just turned 12.
This was what year?
22. And so she was standing there for a bit of time, and Baba came up to her and said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I'm Adi's cousin." And Baba said, "Oh, come on in, sit down." And so Baba was very active on that train. He would get out at all the stops. He'd play ball with his mandali. And Khorshed could not take her eyes off him for a moment. She stayed a bit afar because she didn't want to. She felt it would be rude to stare, but she watched him every moment and was in bliss. So they finally got to. So what happened? They finally got to Sokhori, and there was nothing there. They had trouble finding bullock carts because they needed to carry all of this prasad and all these decorations. So they got 3 bullock carts, one for Shirin Mai, one for Gul Mai, and one for Khorshed and her mother. And they took the carts and they rode into Sokhori. And they didn't get there until after dark. So once they got there, they were shown to this one long room with a dirt floor. And Baba and everyone, all of the relatives that had come and all the mandali from Pune, they were all asked to come into the room, and they set up their bedding rolls, because all they brought were their bedding rolls along with all of these supplies for the party. And so Baba laid his bedding roll right in front of the doorway, and Adi was on one side and Gustaji was on the other, and everyone else laid their bedding rolls down, and they were starting to go to sleep. And Sarosh, Khorshed's cousin, says, "Oh, Merwan." I mean, I've been referring to him as Baba, but at that time they referred to him as Merwan, right? So Sarosh says, "Oh, Merwan, Khorshed sings very well." And Baba says to Khorshed, "Oh, Khorshed, come along and sing a song." And Khorshed, this had been a big day for her, and it had been a long day for her, and she was exhausted. And what she did was she just put her head down and went to sleep. And understandable, right? But I don't know about you, but one of the things that has amazed me about a number of the mandali that I have known is that after a lifetime of service, they'll remember that one thing, that one little thing that they didn't do for Baba, and they'll regret it. Khorshed regretted not singing for Baba on that day. It was just, it's just so beautiful. Yeah. So the next day they got up and they started to decorate Sakori. Well, they got up at 4. They did arti with Maharaj, and then Maharaj would come and be with everyone to, and it was a real family-like atmosphere. And in fact, Khorshed has this one memory of Adi standing and singing, Baba playing the dolak drum, and then Upasni coming over, and he wanted to be a part of it. So Upasni started playing the air sitar and doing sitar tricks with the air sitar, and that was a very clear memory for Khorshed, and she just loved it. So they spent a number of days in Upasni's company and making the place beautiful and celebrating the birthday. But on the specific day of the birthday, the night before, they had asked, Upasni asked Suna, Gulmai, and Shirinmai to make bhajia. So that's chickpea flour, and you fry it up, and you add spices. Now, usually, and so that's how you usually make it. But Upasni asked for one additional ingredient to be added. And what was that? It was the leaves from the neem tree under which he and Merwan sat and did their work together. He asked the neem tree leaves to be put inside, to be mixed in the bhaji batter. Now, I didn't know this, but neem tree leaves are apparently used in medicine, in Ayurvedic medicine, a fair amount, but they're very bitter to taste, so nobody uses them in food. But so it happened, they did it, because that was Upasni's order. So they got up at 4 the morning of the birthday. They did their bath. They did arti. The women made the bhajia, and they said some prayers, and then they took a picture of Maharaj. They carried it around the city. They did a little parade, and then Maharaj called them all back into his hut, his jyoti. He said that he had some very important announcements to make, and he wanted everyone to be there. So they all came back into the hut, and Khorshed was looking around for Merwan, and he was nowhere to be seen. She didn't know what was going on. Where's Merwan, she thought. And Baba came in from the other door, and he came in and he bowed down in front of Maharaj with folded hands and put his head on his hand. And Khorshed said, "Oh, truly Maharaj has chosen the right disciple for his main disciple. Look at how humble he is. Look at how devoted he is to Maharaj. Truly, Maharaj has done a good thing." So, with that, Maharaj makes some announcements. He says, "I have some very important things to tell you. Merwan is the avatar. And from now on, I want you all to go to him. Do not come to me. I have given my spiritual key and my power to Merwan. Merwan will make the world dance on his little finger. So go to him. Later on, I may say things like Merwan's not spiritual, that I've given him nothing, but you should not listen to that. You should listen to what I'm saying now. Go to Merwan, hold on to his daman with both hands, not one hand because it may slip. Hold on to his daman with both hands. Don't come to me any longer." And then he gave out the prasad. He gave the prasad to everyone, and then Maharaj told everyone to eat the prasad. Everyone ate it. Maharaj asked, "So how's the prasad?" And they said, "Well, it's wonderful, Maharaj. It's very tasty. Did you taste any bitterness?" "No, not at all." "Did you know there were neem leaves in it?" "We didn't know that. How could that be?" He said, "It's because I've given you this prasad. Now remember what I've told you, and now it's time for everyone to go home." So after that incredible announcement, he sends everyone home, and everyone starts to leave. And they say goodbye to Maharaj, they say goodbye to Merwan, and they have the bullock carts ready to take them to the train station. And as Suna is leaving Sakori and leaving, she embraces Maharaj. She comes over and embraces Merwan, and Merwan says to her, "Would you like to live with me? Come and stay with me and live with me in the ashram?" And Suna says, "Yes, very much so." And Merwan said, "No, really, would you like to stay where I'm staying and live where I am?" She said, "Yes, willingly, but you move around so much. How there's no place to stay." Merwan says, "Later on, I will be in one place. Would you like to come and live with me and stay with me for your entire life?" And he holds out his hand to her for a promise, and she puts her hand in his and promises that she will do that. And Khorshed is right behind her mother, and she's very excited at this prospect because she is totally loving Merwan. And so she goes to embrace Merwan, and Merwan says, "Go back to Bombay, think of me often, and I will see you later." And Khorshed doesn't know what to say. She walks away, and she's heartbroken. And Gulmai sees this, and because Khorshed started to cry at that, and Gulmai sees it, and she says to Khorshed, "Why are you crying?" Well, Khorshed said, "Because Merwan asked my mother to live with him, but he didn't ask me." And Gulmai says, "Oh, don't worry about that. When your mother comes, you will come also." And that brightened her up. She felt happy with that, and so they all went home, and they went back to Bombay.
What age is she now?
She's still 12.
12.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is before Manzli Meme. So this is when she first met him, and then
Okay.
Baba had spent a little bit of time in Pune, and then walked to Manzli Meme and established Manzli Meme. So I'm not going in chronological order.
No. Okay.
I have to tell you that this was how Khorshed told the stories, not in chronological order. So when we developed the book, we spent a fair amount of time developing a timeline of the stories. And the way Khorshed would tell the stories is that depending on who was in the room, she would tell the stories in different ways. And in fact, one of the stories, I actually hadn't heard part of it because she told only that part of the story to women. So I only found out about it after listening to the transcripts, the tapes of her. Is there another question?
When did she meet Mara?
When did she meet Mara? It was after the monthly meme time, and she met her in Pune. So it was 1923, 1924.
Is there anything about that meeting?
Um,
Nothing specific.
No, it was very specific. Baba had set up the meeting between Khorshed and Mara, and he said to Khorshed, "I have someone special for you to meet. It's your Saki, your best friend." And Khorshed was very curious, who could this be? And so he had brought Mara Mara came to meet Baba, and Khorshed was there, and when the two met, it was like old friends. And they would go out and do things in Pune. Mara knew Pune well, and having lived there, and so they went to festivals, and they did fun things for a few months together. And Mara's dog, Peter, would come to visit Khorshed during the day. And once Mara was with Khorshed, and she said, "My dog," and the dog was there, and she said, "My dog wanders off in the middle of the day, and I don't know where he goes." And Khorshed said, "Well, that's easy. He comes and visits me." and so Meryl was very happy to hear that. Yeah.
What was their age? Were they the same age?
Mara is 3 years older. So Khorshed was born in 1910, and Mara was born in 1907. So Mara was about 3 and a third years older than Khorshed. And even though Mara was older, and most of the other girls were older in the ashram than Khorshed, Khorshed was the one with all of, when there were harebrained ideas about how to show Baba that the women loved him, Khorshed was the one with these ideas. Okay, so it was in when Baba and Mara, Baba and the Mandali and Mara and Khorshed went to see that movie. It was Khorshed's idea to push Mara forward to go and give Baba an embrace. She actually kissed Baba and on the cheek, and Khorshed would tease Mara about it later. We were talking about you giving him an embrace, but you kissed him, and Mara. So there are a lot of charming stories. In fact, one of my favorites was, so they were in, this is later on, they were in Maribad, and Baba would come and visit the women in the post office and have lunch every day. And he would go back up on the hill. I think the Pramashram boys were there, and they were living in that compound with the bamboo matting around, and Baba would come in, and I have to do a little more setup for this story. So if you'll allow me, so we'll just put this aside with the girls in the post office, and we're going to go back to the Manzali meme days for a moment. And that was a very active time. There were a lot of people who were coming to Baba in Bombay and getting to know him during these Manzali meme times. And one of those people was a man named Munshi Rahim, a Muslim Babalover. And this Munshi Rahim, he's the one who gave Baba the name Meher Baba, by the way. And he was also a contractor who was responsible for filling in the Bombay. Bombay was originally 7 islands and a swamp. And what they did was they brought dirt in and they filled in Bombay. And so Bombay is actually built on a swamp. You wonder why it has the aroma? There's a reason. Yeah, it's fairly low. Anyway, Munshi had this beautiful home that the government had given him on Marine Drive, and they were building Marine Drive at this time. And on occasion, Baba would go over to Munshi Rahim's place for lunch, and so usually Baba would just go and come back, but this one particular Saturday, Khorshed was there, and Khorshed went along. And so Khorshed couldn't mix with the men inside, so she would sit outside and watch Baba from the door, through the doorway, and watch Baba hold the darshan while they had their lunch, and she'd sit with Gustaji, and she had her lunch. Now, after the lunch, so Khorshed didn't know what was going on inside the room, but after the lunch, what happened was the Muslim Babalovers would go to Baba and they'd pour water over his hands because he'd be eating with his hands, and they'd have a sheet underneath, and so as the water poured over his hands and he washed his hands and the food particles went down, the food particles would get caught in the little sheet. And the Muslim Babalovers would take the sheet outside and they would eat those little food particles that had been stuck to Baba's hands as prasad. And Khorshed was very impressed. Look at how they're showing their love for Baba. She was very much impressed. Good on them, right? And so she remembered this, now Khorshed was the woman that when she would comb Baba's hair and she found a lice in Baba's hair, she saved that lice for years because it had been so close to Baba. When there was a dust particle under Baba's chair that he had sat on, she would save that dust, and that lint, and she would put it in a matchbox and save it. This is Khorshed. So So now, with this setup, I can come back to Mehrabad, and the post office to say, Baba would come for lunch, and they would, after the lunch, they would wash Baba's hands, they would give him some soap, they would pour water over his hands, and they would collect it in a dish, and then they would throw it out. So one day, Khorshed says, we're not loving Baba enough. We're not loving him 100%. And Mara was like, what do you mean, Khorshed? Because that was what they were all about, was loving Baba 100%. How can you say this? No. When I was in Bombay, and those Muslim Babalovers, when they poured water over his hands, they saved all the food particles, and collected and took it as prasad. They were loving Baba 100%, but not us. And Mara and and Dalit Maya are sitting there saying, "Well, what are we to do, Khorshed? What should we do?" Now remember, Khorshed's the youngest one here, and they're all turning to Khorshed. What should we do? And Khorshed comes up with this idea: we should take that water that is poured over Baba's hands, and we should drink it as prasad. And everybody's like, yeah, that's a good idea. So what would they do? They collected the water, and after Baba would come for lunch, he'd have his lunch, they'd pour the water over his hands, and they'd collect it in a pot, and then Baba would go. And what they would do is they got these little cups, and they divided it up among all the women there, and together they would all drink the water. And Khorshed said it felt so nice. Here we were loving Baba 100%. And everyone, she said, felt the same way. We were just really happy and glad. Now, this went on for about a month, where they were doing this every day. But one day, Baba comes in for lunch. He washes his hands, he leaves, walks up the hill, they divide up the water, they start to drink it, and Baba unexpectedly comes back in, and he sees them all there with this glass, and he says to them, "What are you doing?" And Khorshed goes, "Uh-oh." And Mary says, "Baba, we are loving you 100%. We had this idea that we weren't loving you enough. We poured so we wanted to save your hand washing water, and we're taking it as prasad from you. And Khorshed had this idea, and we all agreed, and this is what we're doing." And Baba just looked at him, and Khorshed said he looked at us like he thought we were crazy, and she was like, she didn't say anything, and she said she thought Baba must have been laughing inside. Anyway, he said, "Well, don't do that anymore. I know that you are," and he said, "Well, you didn't get sick or anything." And they said, "No, Baba, we just felt very nice of having your hand washing water and taking it as prasad, and we felt like we were loving you." And he said, "Well, I know you love me 100%. But what should we do with the hand washing water?" And he said, "But don't drink it anymore." They said, "Well, what should we do?" He said, "You know what would be loving? Don't throw it out on the footpath. Take the hand washing water and throw it and use it to water the plants. That would be loving me 100%. And they said, "Wonderful, we'll do it. That's exactly what we'll do." And Khorshed felt relieved that she dodged the bullet there. Yeah. So there are a number of cute stories where Khorshed does some very, very interesting things. Now I want to be mindful of time, and we're good. Does anybody have another question?
I do, but I don't want to skip too far forward. Do you have anything between her now and her leaving Baba to go and live in Bombay? So that's.
So there's one story. There's a couple. Actually, there's a couple stories I want to tell you about. So we were talking about obedience and Khorshed being obedient. So Khorshed was the only girl his first trip to Persia. So this was the first trip he went up to Persia, and he went and visited Rusipap, that's Katie and Gohair's father, their family. He took the Mandali up there. They did a lot of, they went to a lot of places, and Khorshed talks about those in the book, the places that they saw. And, you know, seeing the Taj Mahal with Baba in the moonlight, very, very beautiful, beautiful time. And they went up to, it was Quetta, right, where they lived? And she met Katie and Gohair, who were very little at that time, 3 and 6, and she talked about Katie's cheeks being like peaches. She thought it was very cute. And at that time, that was the first time that Baba talked about going into the forest for 12 years. And you probably saw those pictures of him being dressed up like a fakir, and all of them in those special kafni outfits. That was the time. And I don't want to focus on that piece. What I want to focus on is when they started coming back, they got close to Ahmednagar, and Baba asked Gulmai Khorshed and her mother Sunamasi. She said he's told them to go back to Ahmednagar, and he was going to take the men Mandali, on a 2-week foot journey, which was very hard. So he sent Khorshed and her father back. And her mother back. And her father had been invited to go on this trip, but the family wouldn't let him because they were so against Baba. Anyway, when he sent Khorshed and her mother back, he told them, go to Ahmednagar, do not step foot out of Ahmednagar, even if the sky falls, do not step foot out of Ahmednagar. And so they said fine. Anyway, they get to Kushru quarters, and they're there for 2 days, and they receive a telegram from Bombay. And what does the telegram say? It says, Khorshed and Suna and Khorshed, come back to Bombay immediately. Kushru is ill. You must come back immediately. Well, Suna looks at that, and she and Khorshed talk it over, and they decide that, well, they have this order from Baba, so she takes the telegram, she crumples it up, and she throws it away. The next day, another telegram comes from Bombay. Come soon. Kushru's condition is serious. You must come back to Bombay. Well, they felt that this was probably a ruse by the family, that he probably wasn't that sick, and they just wanted them to get out of Baba's clutches, so to speak. They just wanted to get them out of Baba's clutches. So, again, but they had their orders. So, Suna takes the telegram, crumples it up, and throws it away. Now, on the 3rd day, another telegram comes, but it doesn't come to Suna. It goes to Gulmai's husband, Khan Sahib. Now, has anybody seen a picture of Khan Sahib? Do you know who this guy is? This is Gulmai's husband, Rustam and Adi's father. He is a big guy. He is a big guy. He is a mean-looking guy, and he had a temper. So, Khan Sahib gets the telegram, and he storms over to where Suna and Khorshed are, and he says, did you see this telegram? And they said, what? It says that you need to come back to Bombay right away. What? And it says that that 2 telegrams have been sent. Did you receive them? Yes, we received them. Why are you still here? He's angry. He is not joking around, and he is unhappy with them. And soon as they can't, and they can't just say, Baba told us to stay. That's not what you do. You keep. Khorshed said we had been around masters enough to know that you keep the master's order to yourself. You don't tell anyone. So they couldn't say. So Suna came up with an excuse. Well, I'm not feeling well. You're not feeling well? This man is close to death. why are you still here? I just can't travel. And then he turns to Khorshed and he says, but why are you here? And Khorshed says, I can't leave without my mother. Anyway, he cannot believe his ears. He is so frustrated. And Khorshed's like, what are we, what do you do? This is his house. This is Kushra quarters. This is his home. And when somebody tells you to leave, you have to leave. This is 1924. This isn't like the modern day when it's equal say and all of that. This is, when a big guy like that tells you to go, you get going. But they held their ground. Anyway, he got so frustrated, he just stormed back over to where he was, and well, they didn't know what to do. They knew they had to stay with Baba's orders, so that's what they did. A couple days later, Baba comes back to Ahmednagar. He stays in a dharamshala about 5 miles away, and he calls Sunu and Khorshed to come and see them. So they go. And now, what does Baba do? He says, I understand you got a telegram from Bombay that asked you to come to Bombay right away because Kakusha wasn't feeling well. Why didn't you go? And he's very serious. Baba's very serious. And they're a little bit stunned, right? They're following his order. He's acting like he didn't give an order and asking them, why didn't they go? And this is kind of confusing. So Suna says she doesn't want to embarrass Baba. She says, well, I wasn't feeling well. And Baba looks at them and says, but why didn't you go? And Khorshed, and he asks it a third, and Suna doesn't say anything, and he asks it yet a third time, why didn't you go? At this point, Khorshed can't stand it. So she says, we didn't go because of your order. You asked us to stay. You told us not to step foot out of Ahmednagar, even if the sky falls. Now, at that, Baba changes his expression completely. Instead of being serious and questioning them, he gets a big smile on his face. Really? You remembered my order? Khorshed says, what else are we to do? Of course we remembered your order every second. My order means that much to you, that you remembered it and you stayed? She said, of course. Well, at that point, Baba says, I'm very happy with you. And he embraces them both. He says to them, I'm very happy that you stayed. Go back to Bombay, get Kaikushu, take him to Pune. Because if you had broken my order, he would have died. But because you kept my order, he will live. Take him to Bombay, and I will meet you there soon. So that's what they did. Yes.
So, did Khorshed ever talk about when Baba asked her to leave and go to Bombay, and what that was? You mentioned in the beginning of the evening how much suffering that was for her, and I've often wondered about it, because she came first with her mother, before Meera, and then Gosmani came, and Meru came, and then Naja was there, but she...
That's right. She was there with Naja, and,
yes.
And Mani too, she was there during those times. But
yes.
The split happened at the New Life.
Right.
So Baba was wrapping everything up, and it was announced that I don't know if you want me to go into the story, but so it was a very busy time. Baba had announced that he was closing the ashram, and it was also announced that only 4 women were going to go with Baba on the New Life. And there was a ton of speculation, of course, you can imagine, about which women it would be. And everybody thought Khorshed was going to be one of them selected, because of course she'd been there from the beginning. Why? Of course she would go. But Khorshed had an intuition that it wasn't that maybe that wasn't going to happen, and she was very upset. In fact, she got sick, very ill, and she had been in bed a lot, and her stomach was just very sick. And Baba would hold these meetings because he was having lots of meetings about selling off this and selling off that piece of property, this piece of property, all their things and everything. He was, where could we sell this and do all that. He's wrapping up the ashram. And they finally have this meeting to announce who would, and Baba had this meeting with everybody, all the women around, because there were a lot of women. And Baba puts this question to everyone. And Baba asks, who loves me? And everybody raises their hand, right? Who is willing to obey me? And Baba says some quotes about something about, and forgive me, I've forgotten. It's about something about slitting your throat in love, and that's the highest thing you can do, something like that. And Khorshed has a very bad feeling about this. So everybody raises their hand that they are going to obey him, and he allows those who are going to obey him to come and kiss his hand. And Khorshed is holding out. She's not willing to say that she's going to obey him. She has this feeling things are not going to go well. So there's a lot of, Baba is saying things about trying to convince her to say that, trying to get her to agree to obey him, trying to get her to come over to the side of who's willing to obey him no matter what. And she's just sitting there, not willing to, she said she knew how it was going to go, and it wasn't going to go well. She said she knew that eventually she'd have to agree, but she wanted to not agree right away, to just so that Baba could know how unhappy she was about this, about what was going to happen. So everybody kissed Baba's hand, and eventually Khorshed agreed to obey him, and Baba embraced her. And it was bittersweet. She got an embrace, but she kind of knew things were not going to go well. And so it happened. Mara, Mani, Goher, and Meru were selected to go on the New Life. And Khorshed was sent to Bombay to live with Meherji and Homai. And it was horrible. Because that's what Baba decided.
You mean staying with Meiji and Homai was awful, being in Bombay was awful? I mean, being separated from Baba was awful.
And all of the above. All of the above. So she had to go. Baba made the decision. And she had to go. And she was not happy about it. She was ill over it. And it was very difficult. The situation was very hard. They could not have... So, you've heard of all of the hardships that the people in the New Life had to endure. No money, begging for everything. Well, the people who lived under Baba's order lived the rules of the New Life, but they didn't have Baba. So if she wanted to go out to do something, she had to get money from Homai. And now Meherji was a strong lover of Mr. Baba, but I'm not sure Homai was. And so Homai had to house not only Khorshed, but Kitty was there. So she had to give up her home to these people under Baba's order, and she was not that happy about it. So it was a difficult time, highly stressful living situation, and yeah, Khorshed, it was a hard time, and then the separation was awful. Khorshed would talk about eating those little anise seeds, and her stomach being so upset out of the separation, Baba, that there was, she had stomach problems and things. It was very hard. And then after the new life, he didn't let her come back. He had her stay in Bombay and take care of her mother, and it was hard. He assigned places for her to live, and I mean the one thing that was a little bit of a reprieve, a breeze, a cool breeze for her, was that when Baba would come to Meherji's house, Khorshed would be asked to do his laundry, so she had that. But it was, and when Baba stepped out of the new life for one day, Khorshed he announced that in advance, and Khorshed wrote him a note and told him about how happy she was about her situation. She was very frank in that letter, and Baba wrote back through Mani and told her to basically keep going. He loved her, and he knew all she was doing for him, and it meant a lot to him, and to keep going. Anyway, so Baba would go on these various trips on the new life, and he would come to Bombay and he would stay with Meherji. And Khorshed knew that he was staying with Meherji in the top floor. They were in the lower floors, and so, but she was never allowed to see him. So one day at breakfast, Meherji let it slip that particular night, Baba was going to go to the circus in Bombay, and so what did Khorshed do? She had to see him. She had to see him. So Khorshed knew Bombay very well. So she knew the route that Baba's car was going to take to get to the circus, and she knew that on Marine Drive there was one part of the road that the car would have to slow down, and she would be able to get a glimpse of him if she went to that spot. And she went to that side of the road and was able to look in the car and see him. This is how desperate she was. She would have to get across town to go to find him, to be able to wait at a particular time for a while before the car would drive by, and to look just to see him. So here's how it goes, right? So she can't get any money from Homai for a bus, so she's got to walk across town or sneak onto buses to get across the street. She isn't allowed to see him, so what does she have to do? She has to create a disguise with a wig and sunglasses so that she can see him without them knowing that it's her seeing him. So she does all of this. She walks across town. She gets the disguise. She somehow gets some kind of hat, and she has these sunglasses, these really dark sunglasses. And she waits, and she waits. Finally, she sees the car that Baba's in, and she knows it's the car. So, and she's right at that point in the road, and she sees the car coming up. So, as the car's getting closer, she puts on the sunglasses so she can get a good look at Baba. And what happens? She can't see through the sunglasses. And she is heartbroken. And the car passes by. So what does she do? No joke. She starts running through the traffic after the car. Running so that she can get at least when the car stops, maybe she can get a glimpse of him. So she runs probably for about a mile to where the circus is. At that point, Baba is inside the circus, and she tries to get in, but she has no money, so they won't let her in. And so she tries and tries, but she can't get in. So she walks home, and she is feeling very dejected and sad. So the next morning, she is is at breakfast, and Meherji tells the story about Baba being at the circus, and that when he was at the circus, Baba said to Meherji, "Go outside, somebody's there. Go outside and see who's there." And Meherji goes out, and Baba sent him out 3 times to look for somebody, but he never saw Khorshed. She was disguised. And this is how this is for her. That was enough. She knew, and Baba knew that she was there, and that was enough for her. But it's that kind of separation that, because of that intense love that she had, her whole life was for him. And this is just during the new life, and it was years together.
So when did she come back from Mumbai?
So she came back from Mumbai in '81 and lived in the trust compound.
So she said 30 years.
32 years.
So she never saw Baba, actually saw him after that
Oh, no.
separation at the new life.
No, she did. She would see, but after the new life, she would go to Marazad for visits.
Oh.
After the new life, she would, you know how Baba, there were those years where Baba would go to Guru Prasad. Khorshed would be asked to go and help open Guru Prasad, and then she would stay there with Baba during the summers, and then close up Guru Prasad, and so she saw Baba, yes, but she wasn't living in the ashram, which was really, and being able to be with Baba, which is what her heart was really wanted to do.
And what happened to make for the decision that she would go back to live in Khorshed quarters in 1981?
Right. Well, she.
Oh, well, that's dark.
That's an important question,
Wow.
Susie.
Yeah.
That's a powerful question.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what happened. Darkness fell.
That's good. That's good.
Where's
Is
the
it
fuse
a fuse
box?
or the?
Yeah.
Probably. Or no power out.
Oh,
It's trying to
The Lord is
switch on.
speaking to us.
It's always
Lordy Lord.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you paid the bill, Bernard.
Actually, how's the solar going? Not too well.
Tell me your question again.
well, just you know,
Tell it again, the lights will go back on.
whose order was it for her to go back in 1981 and after
well,
Baba
right.
dropped his body?
Right.
It's not a fuse, David. It's
So-
not a fuse.
It's not a fuse.
No,
Because it came back on again for a second.
Obviously it
Yeah,
has.
that's right. So after Baba dropped his body, the Khorshed had been given, had been sent a letter by Baba about, you know, and a number of mandali had been sent the same letter to take care of Mera, and she had a talk with Mani about it, and they decided that she would not go to Marazad. She would not go to Marazad. That Mera was fine. So Khorshed visited, and what happened to get her to move to the trust office was that there were some people who really wanted the flat, and they caused a lot of trouble for her, and so she moved to Ahmednagar in '81 to avoid the difficulties there. So that's how that worked.
Did she ever talk about why she thought Baba sent her away?
Well, what is in the book is there's a story about, because she was fed up with this. She was fed up with the whole situation, and she had met some person who claimed to be on the spiritual path. I don't remember his name exactly. It's talked about in here. And she asked him, why why is she not allowed to be with Baba? And this seer said to her, when you plant a tree and it starts to grow, you protect it from the wind and you water it and you take care of it. But then after a certain amount of time, for it to become a full tree, it has to stand on its own, and it has to be able to be on its own. And this is why. That's what he said to her. And as you know, because I know you talked to Khorshed, you know how she was. She had a joy in her that was incredible, an incredible joy, and the strength of that woman was, was incredible. But it was incredibly hard to be separated from him. It was incredibly, and she did it for years. It was really hard. Yeah.
So when you said earlier the quality that she had,
yes,
was the quality of bearing all, being able to.
That's right. That's what Baoji said.
Yeah. So and yet you're talking about how she suffered. So she must have been speaking to others about how she suffered. It just seemed like a contradiction. I was thinking, how did that?
Well, that's an excellent point, Chris. And this may be what I am saying is I am sharing what I know of her from reading the stories. I've been through the book a few times now, and quite a few actually. And from knowing her and knowing that one-pointed love that she had, she didn't necessarily talk about she never said, "Oh, how I suffered." Mm-hmm. She would talk about how that she became physically ill. She would talk about that she was unhappy when she told her story about around the new life, but she didn't talk about her suffering at all. Mm-hmm. So this is me. This is my fault. I'm saying this is what I deduced from knowing her, mm-hmm. that it was pain. It was painful to her. It was, as a human being, I see. If I can only imagine, because I've never had a love like that, and I've never been forced to be separated from that love like that. So I can only imagine, and maybe even imagine, mm-hmm. because this is her. Mm-hmm. So forgive me, that was my fault. Thank you for bringing that up. So I hope everybody's clear on that. That was me.
Wilma, did you? Or were you just stretching?
I think when you read, I always remember getting that strong sense of the pain of separation, particularly oddly enough with Delia de Leon's book. It's kind of like an unrequited love, really. And Francis, of course, wrote endlessly about the separation, and where the chasm fills with the lover's tears, and then the lover swims over to his beloved.
Wow. I think if you read the book, what you will read is how much she loved him. That will come across, and you'll have no doubt. And then you will read what happened, and then that's where it's kind of like, if that's how much she loved him, and that's what happened, what else could it be? Right? Yeah.
On a perhaps a slightly more mundane point, so when Khorshed died, that must have been, was it a surprise or a blow for you? Were you in India or were you in America?
I can only think that Baba was very kind to me to not be there when she passed, because it would have been, I'm not good with that. But what I did have was the week before she died, I was in India with her. She had been, her condition had been deteriorating, and then I came, and she perked right up. So, and then we all had a wonderful week with her when I was here, and she told stories, we would laugh, we'd have food brought in, it was just a really wonderful, joyous time with her. And apparently after I left, pretty much the day after I left, she went downhill again and then died like a week later. Yeah.
I have a question, David.
Yeah.
You said the first time you went to visit her, you saw a smooth, gentle, soft halo above her head the whole time you were there.
It wasn't gentle. It was yes. I saw a halo. It was a ring, a golden ring that was like, it was like on fire. Do you know how a fire distorts the air? It was like that. It was a golden ring around her head, and the air was distorted in the same way that a flame would distort it. It was. I'd never seen anything like that before.
Did you see more later when you visited her?
No, that was the one and only time.
Did you see about the same thing with other mandalay members?
No, I did not.
Did it look like the halos you see in holy pictures?
Yes, it was a thin gold ring. Yeah.
How long were you with her the first visit?
Oh, probably about half an hour to 45 minutes.
So the whole time you saw her?
I did. It was weird because it seemed the most natural thing, and yet it was completely unnatural.
Did anybody else see it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were other people present?
Yes.
I was wondering who was holding.
There's another question when I was reading your book. In the early days, Baba told Mara and Khorshed, maybe others, to sit cross-legged, close their eyes and meditate on him, visualize Baba at their forehead. That's all that in the book. Was it Baba visualizing Baba sitting there or standing or Baba's face? Did she explain in more detail?
She did not elaborate on that.
Just a question. I've got a question.
Yes,
not
please.
particularly with Khorshed, but just the way Baba treated the women mandali and the men mandali. Do you think there was a difference that the way Baba treated the women and the men? I don't know if you could answer that, but in the sense that, like, in the stories, the women seem to know the ways to get around Baba. With Mara and Khorshed setting Mara up to get things out of Baba, as that story you told about getting things done, in such a way that I'm just wondering whether the men would have the nous to sort of go and do things like that.
I don't know that I'm. My reading of things is that what the men did and what the women did were very different things. So naturally, Baba would treat them to a certain degree differently. There's so many stories about how the men would be doing things and then how Baba would work with them, right?
Yeah.
And there are stories about the mandali having fights and everything. I don't remember any of the women having fisticuffs happening. So yeah, I think they're probably quite a bit different. But the fundamentals of that longing and having to obey him, and if things were not done to his wish, could he be hard with, could he be, very stern? I suspect that probably, those main things would probably be at play on both sides, but it'd be probably play out quite differently. That's just my reading.
David,
Yeah.
could you tell us briefly how you came to Baba? So you came to India in 1993. How long had you been following Baba before that?
So I had heard about Meher Baba in 1989. I was training in martial arts pretty intensively in Washington D.C. and someone who was senior to me started talking to me about this Indian dude. And after class, and I was like, okay, sure, nice story, and he gave me books. He gave me the discourses, and he gave me the glimpses. And what happened was, I started reading because I was seeking. My wife at the time so I started doing martial arts pretty intensively, and with martial arts you get Zen and you get Buddhism. You get to learn about Buddhism. My wife at the time was an Indian woman, and she was from a Brahmin family, so I got to learn about Hinduism. And so I was seeking, and I was raised Catholic, so I was getting all of this input from these different religions, and I started reading the discourses, and it felt to me like it was the best integration of Eastern and Western spirituality that I'd ever read in my life. And a lot of the things that Baba said were things that I'd always felt were true in my heart, but I'd never said. And so naturally I was drawn. And in 1992 I was living in Japan. I was working at one of the national laboratories there. And I developed a very, very high fever. And I was reading the discourses and really very happy reading the discourses, and I felt joy in my heart that I'd never felt before. And I finally accepted Meher Baba for who he said he was, God in human form, the avatar of the age. And then and they were going to send me home because my fever was so high and things weren't working. And then I accepted Meher Baba for who he said he was, and my fever broke, and I was able to stay. And then I had a variety of experiences. It was the honeymoon phase, right? So I had a variety of experiences, and one day in 1993, I woke up one morning and I had to go to Myrtle Beach. Had to. Couldn't not go. Had to go. So I got in the car, called my friend, got in the car, drove down to Myrtle Beach, and then that summer of 1993. I was going to test for my next rank of black belt, and I had an Aikido school in Pittsburgh. I was teaching. I was being a PhD student, and I was training up for this. I was very excited. I was going to go for a week intensive seminar in Washington D.C. and test for my next rank of black belt, and I learned from someone that Bauji, Meher Baba's Mandali, was going to be in Washington, D.C. at the very same time. I couldn't believe it. So I called up Pamela Stone, who some of you may know, and I asked, I said, I've got this martial arts thing going on. Would it be possible for me to come over and say hello and meet Bauji? Bow. And she said, of course, come over. So it's the week, so I'd gotten all the plans together. I was ready to go to Washington, D.C. So a week before, a few days before, I was ready to go, and I'm teaching this base beginner an Aikido technique. And he brushed up against my knee very gently. He just brushed up against it. And my knee started to wobble. And it started to be painful intermittently. And as the days, and I thought, oh, this is really weird. And I thought, the guy just touched me, briefly touched me. What's going on? And so I thought maybe my knee will recover, but this shouldn't last very long. Maybe my knee will recover, so I'll just go to Washington, D.C. Turned out by the time I'd gotten there, and after the first morning, I couldn't train at all. My knee was so painful. So what happened was I actually went over to Pamela's house, and I spent the entire week with Baoji. And I don't know how you guys experience Baoji's talks, but man, that was, my brain was like it was just speeding up and working itself out, and I think I slept through a lot of his talks, and I don't know. After that, I went to India, and that's when I met Khorshed. So,
what prompted you to write this book?
well, Khorshed asked me.
Oh.
So, yeah, Khorshed asked me. I got the chance to meet her. Tony Griss actually was the one who took me to meet her. He said, "Oh, you got to meet this Mandali member. She's wonderful. She sits in the trust. You wouldn't meet her always, but he brought me into it and introduced me to her. And I don't know how many of you met Tony, but he has a certain way about him, and so that's what happened. I met her. I started listening to her stories. She invited me back. I kept coming more and more and started recording her stories, and she asked me to write the book, and so I did. And I did a lot of the transcription, the original transcription from the tape recordings. We started getting the, I think I told you about the timeline and getting the different versions together. The thing was, I know many of you have talked with Khorshed. Her English was Khorshed's fourth language, and remember she had left school at 13, and so the vocabulary that she had was a bit, it was simple vocabulary. I mean, her way of expression was very beautiful, and her facial expressions and everything was quite beautiful and quite rich, but just the words themselves wouldn't have conveyed in writing, right? We had to look at how can we do that. And so after we got the stories together, we had to look at ways to enrich the language. And Rustam Falahati again, he came to the rescue, because Rustam said to me, we were trying to figure out how to do this, and Rustam said to me, how Khorshed expresses herself in Gujarati is nothing like the way that she expresses herself in English. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, she's much more articulate. So we had Rustam translate a couple of her stories, and with the vocabulary, the sentence structure, and we used that as our guide to help us mold the language. Anyway, we got the book together. We had a draft. We gave it, 10 years had gone by, right? And we wanted to get it out. 10 years had gone by. We got the book together. We showed it to Meru. And Meru said, no, the language isn't good enough. You guys need to rewrite this. So she sent us to start over. So I was a little bit upset, as you might have guessed, and sad. And Heather walked up to me and said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Any good Baba book takes 20 years to." And 20 years to the year is what it was.
There you go.
Congratulations.
So thank you very much.
How did you embellish the language? How did you take on the second draft?
Oh, Tony, there were about 30 drafts. I mean, we worked this book.
Meru was finally happy?
When did Meru pass? I don't think we gave it to her for a second check. I don't think she was around when the second check came. Yeah.
The title is great. Who gives the title?
Well, Khorshed gave us the title, and Khorshed said she wanted to call it Lucky Lady. And we said,
sounds like a horse.
Khorshed, we can't do that one. we can't give it that title, so we came up with this.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we've still got flashlight batteries. We need to clean up and close up and and
I wonder if the whole road's gone out.
take it. Yeah, I suppose
The road's not on this circuit.
Anyway, very enjoyable.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely.
Happy trails.
So yes, Bernard will need your.
And if anyone wants, there's a few books there.
Yes.
We can sort it out
Yeah, I'll
in the
take
next
one.
few days.
I'll take one.
Will you?
Yeah.
$70. You can give it to me later.
Okay.
How much is the book?
Yeah.
John, what did you say? How much is the book? Sorry. How much are the book?
Well done, David.
Yes, make it so that you come up.